Hello and welcome back to the Metropol Grid. My name is Andre and thanks so much for tuning in. So this is Martial Law, the 5th data pack of the Flashpoint Cycle, and we're now here on the Corp side. There's 12 Corp cards in this pack, which is a lot. So in the interest of time, let's dive just right in. We start here. This is Fairchild, which is a unique piece of ice that you can res for 9 credits. It's a code gate. It also is a Biroid and an AP piece of ice. It has 8 strength, which is pretty impressive, and 4 big subroutines. The first 2 are the same, and they both read end the run unless the runner pays 4 credits. And then the last 2 are end the run unless the runner trashes one of his or her installed cards, and end the run unless the runner suffers 1 brain damage. It's also 5 influence, which is kind of the norm for unique ice, I think, and oh wow, this is an absurdly big piece of ice. So we were all joking as through the cycle we got all the other Fairchilds. There's Fairchild 1, Fairchild 2, and then Fairchild 3. And the 3.0 Biroid was something that's new to Flashpoint Cycle. And we were all joking, at least in my meta, about, oh, Fairchild 4 will come out, don't you worry. And then this came out, which is basically that. And that's super exciting to see that whole package is in the cycle. This is a really big piece of ice. For comparison, the closest this ice compares to is a card called Wotan, which came out in the spin cycle. Now, Wotan didn't get a lot of play besides in really specific decks, and it's this kind of just shows like how much the design space has changed over the last couple of years and the last bunch of cycles. Wotan was also really big, and you could get through it, I guess, if you really wanted to. But just the power level between Wotan and the cheaper Fairchild it's kind of incredible. I think there's no reason to play Wotan anymore if you have Fairchild, just about. So, point is, Fairchild's really good. So, Fairchild is a Biroid, but you can't click through any of the subroutines, which makes it very interesting. It also makes it a lot harder to break. All the subroutines end the run unless you do something, so it does put it in that interesting spot where if the runner wants to get through it and they're really determined, they can. It's just very difficult to get through it. Like, you have to spend 8 credits. It's not if able. It's you actually have to spend 8 credits, which is a big deal. You have to trash a card, and you have to take a brain damage. And that's 8 credits alone. And that's the thing, is like, if you compare this to, or if you look at the numbers of what it costs to break Fairchild with a breaker that's actually specifically really good at breaking code gates. This is Cyber Cipher, which is a 4 strength code gate, which is kind of, I think it's the best you have. The only other thing is a Torch, which is the same numbers. This alone cost 8 credits to break all the subroutines on Fairchild. So it's like, even not installing a Cyber Cipher and just kind of walking through here it's not that much worse, which is kind of nuts and makes it a really interesting card. The best way to get through Fairchild, as far as I understand, is Deus Ex, which gets through it for free considering it's an AP subroutine. You only have API, sorry, but you only have 1 shot of it, but that's still something. The cool thing about Fairchild is it is a Biroid, so there's some cool interactions with, for instance, Architects of Tomorrow, which is the new HB identity. Fairchild, in comparison to Fairchild 3, 2, and 1, it doesn't actually have a painful face check, which is a pretty good trade-off and makes me feel a bit safer as a runner. And the thing with not having a face check, its location isn't that much of a surprise as compared to something like a Fairchild 3. So, resing it and exposing where it is using your Architects of Tomorrow ability isn't that big of a detriment as I would say it might be with a Fairchild 3, which you're actually hoping it does get a bad fate check and the runner hits it and does have to spend credits and trash cards. So I think that's actually pretty good. Another thing you can do with this is efficiency. What's it called? Biroid something efficiency. I think the word research is in there. Wow. Okay. Biroid? How do you spell that? Anyways, there's an event that I apparently can't. That's not right. Okay, I'm not going to try and spell anymore. There is an event that lets you res a Biroid for about 3 credits, and the runner has to, if the runner breaks all the subroutines, it gets de-resed. But it basically lets you res Fairchild for 3 credits, which is actually not too bad, considering how hard this thing actually is to break. I think the last thing just about Fairchild is that it is a unique piece of ice, which makes it interesting in terms of deck building, because you definitely want one of these res at some point in the game. Trying to figure out where to put it also is very interesting. Do you put it on R&D against a really heavy R&D pressure deck, or do you put it on your scoring remote and constantly plug things into that server that the runner might have to check? But the idea is, do you put 2 in your deck and knowing that one of them eventually might be a dead draw, or do you only put 1? This card also makes accelerated beta tests so much more exciting because a 9 credit ice is just absolutely dope. I'm definitely going to be putting one of these in just about any mid range or any HB deck that wants to score behind ice. This is super good. Let's move on. This is Friends in High Places, which I think 100% is the best, hands down the best card in this data pack. And it's for many reasons. Let's start just what it does. For 2 credits, you get this operation. It's a terminal operation, so that means after you play it, your turn's done. There's no way around that. And it simply says install up to 2 cards from archives, paying all install costs. And really importantly, it's only 1 influence. So this card lets you pull cards back from archives, which is a really, really powerful ability for many reasons. The amount of flexibility on this card is absurd. It starts out being an overall, all-around really, really, really good card, and I guess I have some negative things to say about it, I suppose, but we'll get to those at the end. This is Interns, and Interns is it's a no influence, it's a neutral double, so you spend 2 clicks and you get install 1 card from archives, not paying install costs. Now, Interns does see play, especially in decks that require certain pieces to be around as part of the winning strategy for the corp. For instance, if you have a corporation that needs something like a defensive upgrade to score an agenda, things like Caprice, Interns is really good because even if they trash your Caprice, you could always Interns it back. Friends in High Places does just that, but even better because it allows you to put 2 cards back. You do pay a bit more money, but I think it's totally worth it considering you can easily bring back a card that makes you money. And that's really good. Like, let's just talk about HB, right? So if you're playing this in HB and you play this last click, you get to install 2 cards. So if you're playing the core HB, the Engineering the Future, you gain a credit back, which is really good. And there's a lot of things you can install. Let's start with this. Advanced Assembly Lines is a really cool card in specifically Engineering the Future. You install this with your Friends in High Places, and then you can res it on just as the runner's turn starts, and then you can install another card back while making money. The idea is that you have a very easy play, which is you have no scoring server, right? And you install Advanced and Agenda just out in a naked remote server, and then you play Friends in High Places. And what you can do is you can install an ice from the archives in front of that agenda, and then you can install Advanced Assembly Lines, and then when the runner's turn starts, you can pop the Advanced Assembly Lines to make money and install another piece of ice on that new server or a defensive upgrade. That's a lot of flexibility. You can install 2 Advanced Assembly Lines and basically be playing Friends in High Places as a way to get clicks on their runner's turn in a certain way and to get money back. That's actually really, really good. 2 other cards I want to highlight just because like Friends in High Places works with everything. It's just universally great. Another really cute one is Lakshmi Smart Fabrics. The idea is that you Friends in High Places Lakshmi as well as another like an asset or an upgrade. And you res Lakshmi, so it gets a counter on it, and then you res another asset, so it gets 2 counters on it, and you're already protecting 3/2s, which you could have just installed naked that turn before. You install a 3/2, have a copy in your hand, Friends in High Places, get a Lakshmi back, and that's absolutely amazing. Another really good one is Clone Suffrage Movement, which lets you recur operations. So if you spend 1 click, Friends in High Placing, there needs to be like a short term for that. Let's just say high placing. That's fine. If you start high placing a Clone Suffrage Movement onto the table, and then you res it at the end of your turn if it lasts, or the runner's turn, and you get your high places back, and then you can keep cycling this. So you're spending 1 click to get 2 cards back, and the runner basically has to spend 1 click to trash your suffrage movement, or the cycle is going to continue. That's really, really obnoxious. If you compare this with other things like enhanced logins protocols that makes running harder, or even encryption, something enhanced encryption, the one that makes trash costs go up by 1. The name eludes me at this point. But that's really good. Other things this works with, it doesn't even have to be an HB, but the kind of ice that trash themselves. Trap ice are really, really, really fun. And they don't see a lot of play just because I don't think people like the idea that it's a one-time use. Some of their abilities are not so good. I think Lab Dog is really sweet, and I like to put it in decks. The idea is you hit Lab Dog, you trash a piece of hardware, and then Lab Dog goes away. And now you can play Friends in High Places and bring the Lab Dog back, especially when the runner's reinstalled their second Desperado or their last Desperado, or their MU or their clone chip or anything really, really useful. And that's really cool. Another really good one is Special Offer. So you can be using Friends in High Places in NBN as an econ card. Just get a special offer back and get an asset back. Install them all on the same server. So no matter what, money's coming in. And that's really, really good. Just universally for one influence, this is absolutely fantastic. It fights against ice trashing. If you're playing against people that are running a lot of en passant, parasite, cutlery, your ice is coming back. This helps against DLR, data leak reversal. This helps against just noise milling. Recursion is super, super good. Now, I mentioned a negative thing, and this does help acid spam decks, which is a thing that you might have seen if you've been playing competitive Netrunner for the last kind of couple months. The idea is that there's a lot of decks out there that, let's try and see if we can find one, but there are decks that run like an absurd amount of assets, 30, 32 assets. Low Pair is a player, Alex Bradley. He's the Canadian Nationals winner of 2016. I think he posted his deck list on here. But the idea, he was running at the Store Championship, he was running, here we go, a Gagarin deck that had some large amount of assets, 27 assets. And this is considered what people call a prison deck. The idea is that you want to build a board state with all these assets where the runner can't afford to contest and trash them, because it'll put them in a situation either where they'll get tagged or something really bad will happen. And you can really wear a runner down if you have 27 assets. Most of them need to be trashed on site. And then you have things like controlling the message or industrial genomics or a Gagarin that makes the trash costs harder to deal with. So this deck is running 3 Friends in High Places alongside 3 Museums of History. He's not running, what's that card that lets you preemptive? He's not running any preemptives, so there's a bit less recursion, but there's also 3 Jackson Howards. So the game looks a bit like this, you know, like you install 3 assets, the runner trashes all of them if they really need to, and then you put out a Museum of History, the runner trashes those so you can't recur them, then you install your Jackson, the runner trashes your Jackson, and then you play Friends in High Places, bringing back a Jackson and a museum, and then you recur with the museum, the Friends in High Places, and the recursion just goes. It's absolutely incredibly cyclical. Like, Friends in High Places does not remove itself from the game, which means you can recur it with the Jackson that you recurred, or that, you know, if you didn't remove it from the game, or the Museum of History, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And it's some people consider it to be a negative play experience, and I can see that. I think it really encourages people to run things like Wizard, which might not be the kind of runner that you want to see be playing all the time, and it's kind of annoying that you're forced into to play a certain ID just so you don't lose inherently. But that's kind of how things go. I think there's a lot of other IDs that can deal with this. Like even just putting in Solset Slums in your deck is really good against Friends of High Places. I think that's a really big deal. The other option is archive interface. Here, let's pull some of these up. Solset Slums looks awesome. It really stops recursion. And I think with everyone, with everybody running Friends in High Places, which I think you will be, considering it's one influence, this card gets a lot better. Archives interface is a similar effect, but it's a bit more expensive and harder to use, but it's still an option, I guess, if you want to, if you can make running archives better for you. And that's good. And just, High Places is really, really, really good. Getting back the cards that win you the game, it's a lot easier to build decks that require certain assets or upgrades to have a cool board state, like things like there's that HB card that increases your hand size by 5. You can now kind of sort of reliably have that on the table all the time and play some sort of CI combo game out of the core HB identity somewhat. You can bring back your Jacksons. You can bring back your pad campaigns. You can do anything, and the flexibility on this card is absurd. I can easily see this as a one or two of in most decks from now on, especially decks that have assets in them that are important. Even just running 3 pad campaigns and putting 2 of this in a deck is super annoying. It's really, really good. Moving on, this is Manta Grid. It's a unique upgrade. Just to give you a bit of a backstory, I played this last weekend. I played New Angeles, which is the new, it's a board game from Fantasy Flight, and it takes place in the Netrunner universe. I have really good things to say about it. I had a lot of fun. We played it with 6 players, and this region comes up. It's actually, Manta Grid exists in the city of New Angeles, which is in Ecuador, if I'm correct, in this American tax state or something. I forget what it is, but it's basically a part of the United States that is in Ecuador. It's where the Beanstalk is, and Manta Grid is the home of the HB headquarters. So this is where HB exists as a company. So let's talk about the card. It's 1 to res, it's a unique upgrade, and it's a region, so only 1 per server. It has a whopping 5 trash cost, and its ability reads, if the runner has fewer than 6 credits or no unspent clicks when a successful run on the server ends, you have 1 additional click to spend on your next turn, and it's only 2 influence. This is a super interesting card. It is a defensive upgrade that's an offensive upgrade. So I think, so defensive upgrades in this deck usually in Netrunner usually help you score agendas, and this does help you score agendas too, but in a very, very different way. And even if it doesn't help you score agendas, it helps you in the future. That didn't say much. The idea is that if you have 4 clicks on a corp turn, that's absurdly good, because you can do something as simple as installing one of the maybe 6 3-2 agendas you have in your deck, or even 3-1 agendas. You can install them and advance, and score. And that's really good. Having a way to score 3-2 agendas out of hand is absurd, and that's an easy way to close the game. Now, Manta Grid only fires under 2 conditions, whether the runner has less than 6 credits or no unspent clicks. Having less than 6 credits is, I don't know how often that's going to fire, and that really depends on your meta and the kind of deck that you are playing. Right now, runners have a lot of money because of cards like Temujin Contract. It's very easy for a runner to have money, I think, so having less than 6 credits while accessing might not be a thing. But having no unspent clicks, that's something HB is specifically good at doing. Oh, actually, yeah, just before we get off this credits thing, there's ways to make the runner have less credits. A really nice one is, what's it called? Virtual Tour. The idea that you can start playing these and put it on top of a Manta Grid. When does this fire? This fires when a successful run on the server ends. Okay, so that's actually really important. So the idea is if you have a virtual tour on the server and they access the virtual tour first, they might go down to less than 6 credits, hit the Manta Grid, and you're good to go. So these two pair specifically well together, as does any asset on top of the Manta Grid that has to go. Like things like Jeeves on top of a Manta is kind of great. The idea that this whole server is going to cost you 10 credits to flatten, let alone Jeeves works super well with a turn that has 4 clicks on it anyways. But the runner trashes that, runs on the server, spends clicks of credits, hits this, needs 10 credits to trash everything. That's actually pretty good. So the other option has no clicks, and HB is the best corporation at robbing clicks, and that's for many reasons. Firstly, you have ice, Biroid ice, that needs to be clicked through a lot of the times. A very common play is to put something like a Fairchild or a Turing or any ice on a remote server early in the game, and then put an asset usually behind it. Generally, these are like Adonis campaigns that you want to have running in the early to mid game. And a lot of times the runners will run that server, click through the Fairchild 3 because they need to, or through the Turing because they want to, and find out what you have in that server. And if that is a Manta Grid, you're kind of good to go. You can basically score a card from hand, score a 2-point agenda from hand early game, which is nice to get those out of HQ and just to get going. I think you can really punish that. Fairchild 3 works really well with Manta Grid, considering generally when you run through Fairchild 3, you're going to click through it so it doesn't fire. The interesting question now is, if you run through a Fairchild 3 or a Turing, do you access a card if you fear it's a Manta Grid? Like if it's face down, do you access? Because it could be Adonis, right? It could even be Agenda, but it also could be a Manta Grid. Just so you understand how this works to get the most out of this card, the last point where you can res this card is if you ask, as a corporation, is if you ask the runner, do you want to access? And as soon as the runner says, yes, I would like to access, they are locked in and they can't change their mind. And at that point, you can res the Manta Grid. So now they understand what a bad spot they are. You don't have to res this like right when they initiate the run or before they commit to an access, and then they can see like, oh, it's a Turing, I'm not clicking through. As soon as they say, you ask, do you want to access? If they say yes, you can res a Manta Grid. They can react at that point. So if they have money on a cash or something, I guess they could take that off. But that's the last window. So if you want to surprise people with a Manta Grid, that's how you do it. I think that's good. I think that's all right. I also think this upgrade has a lot of space on central servers, just because it protects them in an interesting way. 5 to trash is a lot, and runners may not be that keen to trash it. It's really good, again, with Biroids. It's good with other cards that tax clicks, things like Enhanced Login Protocols, which is a current that costs 2 clicks for a run. That's pretty good. Things like Enigma are good, because a lot of the times runners will run last click to get through Enigma, or even a Viper. Viper is another good choice. And with 2 influence, you can put this in any ID. And I think you can do something cool with it. You just generally want to do this with an ID that has a lot of 3-2 agendas. I think lastly, maybe the most interesting thing you can do with this is an offer you can't refuse. So if you put Manta Grid on a central server, and then you play an offer you can't refuse, the runner will be running on the corporation's turn, which means they have no clicks left. So Manta Grid will always fire. You just have to make sure you don't do this on a server with an end the run, because then the runner will choose to end the run. So just be careful where you put that, and that might be an easy way to get 2 agendas if you can fast advance next turn, or 1 agenda. I'm also not 100% sure on this, if someone can correct me, but I'm pretty sure the text on this, like if you gain the extra click and... Oh, wait. No. If they trash Manta Grid, you don't gain the extra click. Because the Manta Grid this is for sure. If they trash Manta Grid, it's not there when the run ends, so you won't get the effect. But if you do get that and then they come back to trash Manta Grid, you still will get your click. I'm pretty sure about that. Let's move on. This is Mind Games. Mind Games is a 0-res code gate. It's a Psi-Ice and a Deflector. Deflector is the most exciting subtype of a piece of ice. It's 0 to res and 4 strength, which is nutty. And it has one big subroutine that reads, you and the runner secretly spend 0 credits, 0, 1, or 2 credits, reveal spent credits. If you and the runner spent a different number of credits, choose another server. The runner is now running on that server instead of passing Mind Games. For the remainder of the run, the runner must add 1 installed card to the bottom of his or her stack as additional cost to jack out. What a massive piece of ice. I remember when I started Netrunner, one of the first cards I saw when I was looking through data packs was Bullfrog, and I immediately bought the pack Bullfrog was in because Bullfrog looked like the coolest thing ever. And this is basically what Bullfrog wants to be. This is not a good time to talk about why Bullfrog isn't great, but let's just say Bullfrog has the same subroutine, which it doesn't. It has a lot worse one. This costs 0 to res compared to 3, which is great. At 3 influence, it's a bit hard to splash, but this is just definitely at home in Jinteki. So, if you hit this, it's going to be a bad time. It's going to be a really bad time. There's a problem with Psi-Ice. There's a couple problems with them. One of them is that Psi-Ice can be abused in some ways. I think Snowflake is the easiest Psi-Ice to abuse, and there's been a lot of Psi-Ice that's been printed in the last cycle that has been a lot better, but let's just look at Snowflake. Snowflake is weird because if you have Snowflake as an outer piece of ice and you just keep running it over and over again, the corp is going to have to keep spending money if they want to keep you out, which kind of sucks. And if you really have nothing better to do, this is sort of like spending Lamprey 4 times a turn, as long as it's the outermost piece of ice. Now, Mind Game is not a piece of ice that you want the side game to fire, just because if it does, it's going to be really taxing. If you lose the side game, you're going to be running on another piece of server. So if you want to jack out, you're going to have to jack out. Like, you're going to have to trash one of your cards, or not trash one of your cards, mind you. Put 1 card on the bottom of your deck, which in some ways is better because you're playing against Jinteki and you like having more cards in your stack so you don't get milled out. But in other ways, it's actually pretty bad. If you're playing something like an Anarch that are running these conspiracy breakers, things like MK Ultra or Paperclip, you don't mind if your cards are trashed, but if your cards are on the bottom of your deck, specifically Anarch has no way to get to them if they're programs. In fact, no way to get to any of them if they're anything. So that's kind of interesting. But the idea is that if you fail this game, you're gonna be running on another server. You can't jack out, right? So you have to access if it's a remote server. So if you have a June bug in a remote server with 3 advancements on it that has no ice in front of it, you can send the runner there, and if they want to not hit the 6 net damage, they're going to trash one of their cards. It's cute. I don't know how good it is, but it's definitely cute. But that's the thing about Mind Game. It's 0 to res, so even if you spend throughout the whole game, because I don't think you're going to play the side game more than once, basically on the face check, just because this is really, really punishing to hit. Because if you're throwing another server and then you have to run through something like a DNA tracker, you'd much rather break the Mind Game and get through it. So you're probably going to only spend about 2 credits resing this piece of ice in the worst case scenario, making this just really, really, really solid. It's good anywhere on a server, which is awesome. Like, it's good as the innermost. It's good on the outermost. It also helps you run these like absurd kill servers. I've never actually pulled this off, but the idea that you can now run cards like Whirlpool and build these like ridiculous servers that you get through Whirlpool, maybe you play RSVP. We're going like heavy into absurd territory at this point, but like you Whirlpool into an RSVP, so now they can't spend credits, so they lose the mind game, and then you throw them back on the outside of this server again, and they can't jack out. Maybe you have a neural katana in there, and you just build this nightmare server that instantly kills the runner. Well, not instantly, it's actually going to be really slowly, and it's going to be a bit of a process, but it's going to be fun. That's really cool. That's a just absolutely monstrous piece of ice. Of course, there's bonus synergy if you run this in Nisei division. It is a side piece of ice, so you'll make some money credits on it. Again, I don't know whether this card makes Nisei division good. There is an inherent problem of IDs that benefit off of ice, just because this ice is not going to fire often. If the runner's running through this more than once and playing the side game, like, I think the side game's only going to fire on a Hail Mary run, because you don't want the side game to fire. You'd rather break this. And at 4 strength, it's not that easy to break. Really, really good piece of ice. Just about any Jinteki is going to be running this. And there might be an argument for splashing it. I'm not sure. This is Nihongai Grid, which again is one of the regions in New Angeles. This shows up in the board game, and this is actually where the headquarters of Jinteki now exist, of the Jinteki Biotech Corporation. It used to be in Neo Tokyo, and sometime in the near past, or technically to us, the near future, they now have their headquarters based in Nihongai Grid, which is in Ecuador. So it's very similar in a lot of ways to Manta Grid, which is funny because that's the HB headquarters, and it's 1 to res, it's unique, it's a region, so 1 per server, and it has a similar clause. It says if the runner has fewer than 6 credits or fewer than 2 cards in his or her grip when there is a successful run on the server, you may look at the top 5 cards of R&D and swap one of those cards with a card in HQ, and again, 5 to trash. So the 6 credit condition is the same on Manta Grid, and there's definitely ways to help that. Things like Mumbai Virtual Tour, just playing a lot of assets. And that's all nice and good. Now, the 2 cards thing is like, it's compared to the click thing, it's the thing that Jinteki's meant to be good at. They're either meant to be good at reducing hand size by doing brain damage, or just doing net damage during a run. Now, the weird thing about this card is if I'm the runner and I have less than 2 cards in my hand, and then there's a face down card in a remote server, or even just I'm running an R&D in HQ, I won't be accessing. Just because if there is 2 cards in my hand, you can hit a snare and lose the game. So I don't see a lot of times in which there's 2 cards. Oh, I guess it's when the run ends, right? Yeah, so that's interesting, I guess. You could put this with a fetal AI, and it will probably fire. So that's cool. But just running on this, if you don't have something in the server that does damage to you, I just don't see when a runner is going to be intelligently accessing with only 2 cards in their hand against a Jinteki deck that's specifically trying to hurt them. So that's kind of a bit dodgy. In terms of the ability, I think looking at the top 5 cards of R&D and swapping one of those cards with a card in HQ is a bunch worse than having an extra click. So like the extra click it's obviously good. You can get an extra credit, but more importantly, you can fast advance agendas. What's so good about this ability? It lets you find a piece in your hand that you might need, or a piece in your deck. So, yeah. So the idea is if the runner is has 1, or maybe they're accessing with 1 card in their hand, and that's it's near the end of their turn. This lets you look at the top 5 cards of your deck and maybe find that neural EMP you need, or maybe find that dedication ceremony that you needed so that you can get your Ronin off. Like that sort of stuff seems kind of cool. That lets you find a combo piece to maybe end the game because the runner's already in a bad spot. And that is nice. That's really cool. This could be used in industrial genomics for that reason, because it's really hard to trash for 5. So it makes things a lot dicier. And just looking at the top 5 cards of R&D is useful. Like just knowing what you're going to draw is pretty useful. Maybe that sets up cool things like Mutate. So you can Nihongai into Mutate. I don't know. That seems like a lot of moving parts, but it's definitely an interesting card. At 2 influence, maybe you could splash this into other factions. Things like Cybernetics Division, it seems to be the one deck that can do reduced hand size pretty quickly. So, Cybernetics Court was the name of the other card I can remember a while ago with the hand size. But Cybernetics Division might do something with this. Even kill decks, or decks that do a kill deck outside of Jinteki, something that does I don't know how many cards do meat damage or net damage during a run, but if this is also good against Faust, right? Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. It's interesting. It's nifty. I don't have any cool ideas of anything to do with this yet, but it might be something. Who knows? That's a good review, I guess. This is IP block. So this card was spoiled a while ago. We saw like enough of the text on it to basically know what it does. And it was spoiled at a time where AI was everywhere. This is a really cool card because it targets AI really, really well. So it's 2 to res. It's a barrier and a tracer. And it's 4 strength. So already 2 to res, 4 strength. That's really good numbers. So IP block, when the runner encounters IP block, give him or her 1 tag if there is an installed AI. That's really good. And there's 2 subroutines. Trace 3. If successful, give the runner 1 tag. And then end the run if the runner is tagged. Connection terminated. And it's only 1 influence. This card is comparable in a lot of ways to Wraparound. So Wraparound was a barrier that came out around the time where people were playing a lot of Atman decks. If Atman is like the AI breaker that came out in Creation and Control. And Atman was really good. Just about everyone was running Atman with Data Sucker, and it was a pretty dominant archetype in the competitive scene. So then Wraparound came out, which really threw that on your head. It was such good AI hate, and the idea is that if you don't actually have a Fractor, it's so hard to break with an AI, so people started putting Fractors in their deck just for this, and Wraparound still saw a lot of play. The idea is that it's a cheap ice at 2 to res, and at some point it's really good against AI, and then once a breaker comes out, it costs 1 to break anyways, which is not too bad considering you paid 2 for it. Now compare that to IP block, which also specifically hates AIs, and also has 1 influence, so it's easy to splash on other factions as AI hate. So there's like a Venn diagram of 3 sections, I think, maybe a bit more, maybe, yeah, definitely, maybe a bit more, but let's go through the numbers. So you're playing against a runner that does not play AIs. So this card basically says trace 3. If successful, they have a tag and or end the run. So you have to compare that trace 3 to the comparable price of breaking this piece of ice. So if I'm running on this and I don't have an AI and the runner says, okay, well, it's trace 3 and then you have a tag or end the run, hopefully I have a link and then I'll just pay 2 to break it. The corp might boost. I don't think boosting this is such a good use of time unless there's like a huge credit difference. But otherwise, if you're playing like Andromeda or Kate or whatever Anarch has link, I guess Reyna or Edward Kim. This is basically 2 credits to get in without a breaker. Of course, if it's in a really bad position where there's like an agenda behind this and you're just trying to trace through, the corp might boost. But otherwise, you know, you can always get through this with very little money. In the competitive scene, a lot of runners are running Link right now just because things like controlling the message are, it's a very common corporation. So Link is kind of a thing. So Trace 3 might actually not be that big of a deal. And this ice might be useless in that matchup. Now, the thing is, you only have to break 1 of these subroutines, right? This is the second part of this Venn diagram. If you're floating tags, this is a 4 strength and the run. If you don't care how many tags you have, 4 strength, barrier, and the run, which is relatively taxing. For a card like Paperclip, that's 3 credits to get through a 2 res cost ice. For things like Corroder, again, 3 credits, which is not too bad at all. So if you are floating tags, this does get annoying. You might not have to worry about the trace then. Now, if you do have AIs and you're playing Tag Me, again, you only have to worry about 1 subroutine. If you're playing AIs and you're not playing Tag Me, you also only have to worry about, you have to worry about 2 subroutines. So that's actually pretty good. So the best, of course, this card is against any AI deck that is not floating tags. If I'm playing Eater or playing Faust and I'm playing Account Siphon, it's only 1 subroutine that matters, which is still not too bad. For 1 influence, this is an easy splash. It definitely is an easy splash and will hate on AIs. Is it better than Wraparound? I think so. Unless everyone's running Link, then not so hot. Let's move on. This is Thoth. So Thoth is an Egyptian deity. It's an Egyptian deity that's attributed to, or it's the deity that's related to writing and hieroglyphics, which is really cool considering NBN is the information company. It also has the head of an ibis, which is a bird that looks like that. So Thoth is a unique ice. So we're getting 2 of these in a pack, always the most exciting ice. It's a Sentry Tracer. It reses for 7. It has 6 res cost, and it's only 3 influence, which is kind of nutty considering it's a unique piece of ice. So Thoth has an on-encounter clause that says when the runner encounters Thoth, give him or her 1 tag. So similar to IP block, but less conditional. And it has 2 subroutines. Trace 4. If successful, do 1 net damage for each tag the runner has. And then again, trace 4, but this time, if successful, the runner loses 1 credit for each tag he or she has. So this is what I'd consider a tag punishment piece of ice. If the runner has no tags and you actually are going to pay 7 credits for this, I think this ice kind of sucks. If you pay 7, that's a lot. It is hard to break because it's a 6-cost sentry, but even if you don't break it, like let's say you don't break it, for 7 credits, you're getting a piece of ice that gives you a tag, does 1 net damage, and you lose 1 credit, which is very comparable to a piece of ice that we're going to come up in like 2 cards called Mausolus, which costs 4 to res and isn't unique. Mausolus does basically that, but with no, like, just, it's a lot cheaper. But this tag, net damage, 1 credit loss, for 7 credits, I'm not convinced. Which means this ice is specifically good when the runner is floating a lot of tags. If they've gone completely tagged me, if you've mid-seasoned them, even if you've just hard-hitting news them and they're not clearing tags, this ice gets a lot better. It gives an extra tag, which might be inconsequential if you've already been mid-seasons, but at that point you have Trace 4, kill the runner, which is scary. There's been cards like Shinobi, which also have these kind of clauses where, well, that's not at all right. That have clauses where if the corp has more money and you hit this, automatically kill them. I didn't see Shinobi see a lot of play, just because maybe getting more money and then resing a 7-cost piece of ice is pretty difficult. But this, you just have to beat the trace and then you can kill the runner. So that's actually pretty cool, the idea that you can kill the runner if you have more money than them and they have like at least maybe 6 tags. Funny enough, if they have Obelisk, they get harder to kill the more tags they have, so that basically counters that out in some kind of cute way, but still funny. Trace 4, if successful, the runner loses 1 credit. That helps the trace fire maybe the second time they get through it, and it just robs them of money. Having a trace that makes the runner lose money is kind of interesting, because if it comes down to that I have to spend 4 to boost to prevent myself losing 8, then it's basically just says lose 4 credits, right? Or 3 credits if you have Link. So it's not likely that the runner's going to be like, oh, suddenly I lost 12 credits. It's generally going to be you lose only 4 credits if you want to be a bit realistic about it. But that's still okay. Now, I'm not actually that jazzed about Thoth, just because comparably to other tag punishment ice, I think there are better ones. Information Overload is a really cool piece of ice, because it's very similar. It scales based on how many tags the runner has, but it scales in a lot better way. Because you can always beat a trace, right? If you have a lot of Link, traces don't do anything. If you have a bit of money, traces don't do anything. So if you're playing a Count Siphon and you have a lot of credits, but have a lot of tags, like, you can always trace through Thoth. Compare that to Information Overload, which has a pretty underwhelming on-encounter effect, but gains subroutines. And gaining subroutines is generally a lot harder than beating a trace, because if you have 12 tags, this is a card that has 12 subroutines, which is really hard to deal with, besides like certain sentry breakers that break all the sentry subroutines, but that's generally really, really good. And if the runner, if there's 12 subroutines that say the runner trashes one of his or her installed cards, they basically wipe the board. And it's like it was turn 1 for the runner, except you're already set up and the runner already has a lot of tags and you're basically good to go to do whatever you want, because they no longer have Plascretes or ways to pull out a Clot or basically to do anything. I think this card is a lot better. It's technically garbage if the runner isn't floating a lot of tags, but if you want to put a piece in your ice that basically wins the game if the runner is tagged, this is a much better one. Also, this thing came out, I keep forgetting the name, I think it's Data Ward. I'm pretty confident because there's like, all these cards that start with the word data. I think Data Ward is even a lot better than Thoth. At 6 to res, it'll almost always cost the runner 3 to get through, compared to this, which cost 1 and 1 net damage and a tag. So I don't know. And if the runner goes tag me, they now have to deal with an 8 strength 4 end the run piece of ice. Which, if your goal was to give the runner a lot of tags and then win, I think this might be better. I'm just not convinced that the Trace 4 is going to win the game for the net damage. It might, but if you're going to give the runner some tags, this is a much better piece of ice than, I think, Thoth. I think this is also a lot easier to use. Yeah, both of these also work with, what's it called? Sub boost, because it's a high strength thing that's kind of hard to deal with. So that's cute too. Let's move on. Oh yeah, sub boost Fairchild. Actually, no, that's probably bad, because I think it's much easier to break a big barrier, because then it costs like 8 credits to break with Paperclip. So I don't know. Wayland time. Hey, there are 3 Wayland cards in this pack, and they're all relatively interesting. Let's start here. This is a unique asset. His name is Anson Rose, and he's an executive. He's one to res, and he says when your turn begins, place one advancement token on Anson Rose. Whenever you res a piece of ice, you may move any number of advancement tokens from Anson Rose to that ice, and 4 credits to trash is not too bad at all. This is also one influence, which is splashable, but all the ice that can be advanced is basically Wayland, so you'd have to do something cool else with it. Him being unique means that Anson is targeted by Rumor Mill, so if that's a thing in your meta, maybe you want to watch out. But otherwise, what can Anson Rose do? Anson Rose is really cool. I like this card a lot. So advancing ice is generally a really not a good thing to do in Netrunner, and that's because of the tempo hit it takes, right? Because if you advance a card, you're paying a credit and taking a click. And I kind of see that taking basically 2 credits, right? Because that click that you spent advancing a piece of ice, you could have clicked for a credit. So not only did you pay one, you have the opportunity cost of paying, of gaining a credit. So that makes advancing a lot worse. It does advance your board state in some ways, but whether an ice wall at strength 1 versus strength 2 is worth 1/3 of your turn and somewhat 2 credits, that's not convincing me. So we have Anson Rose that basically pays off in some ways like a pad campaign, except if we're going to say advancements are better than credits, considering not only does it cost 1, but it also costs time, Anson Rose should be in some ways superior to a pad campaign, which is very, very interesting. Now, Anson is only usable in ice, which is okay because he would be pretty busted if you could advance out an agenda with him, but how good is advanceable ice? So again, to the Venn diagrams, I don't think this, is this a Venn diagram? There's 4 kinds of advanceable ice. The first, we're going to go through all of them. Oh, of course we're going to go through all of them. The first is Ice Wall. And this is the kind of ice that just gains strength when you advance it. So things like Shadow, Ice Wall, Hadrian's Wall, and there might be more, I'm forgetting. So if you put an ice wall in front of Anson Rose and you get just like 2 advancements on it and then they run the server, you res the ice wall and you can make an ice wall strength 3 barrier. And that's not too bad. It's not too bad at all. Firewall. There we go. Adding tokens to ice wall is always going to be good. At some point it hits 5 strength and then it is a liability to David. It's also somewhat of a liability to Cutlery if you want to put a lot of advancements on the single piece of ice or Parasite, stuff like that. Parasite less so, I guess. But that's good. You're making your ice beefier, and having a 9 strength ice wall maybe at some point in the game that you only paid 1 credit for, that's kind of really nice. Now, the second kind is what people call the space ice, and this is actually a non-bow, which, oh, wow. Yeah, I put an L in there. Wormhome. Yeah, there's meant to be an L in there. This is a huge non-bow, which is really upsetting. So Wormhole can be advanced and its res cost is lowered by 3 for each advancement token on it. But the problem with Anson Rose is the tokens only move after you res the piece of ice. So you pay 9 for the Wormhole and then 3 advancement tokens get on it. So it does nothing whatsoever. These don't work at all together. So Wormhole, Nebula, Orion, and Asteroid Belt, no good. Now, this is very interesting. Morphling. I thought that was what it's called. Okay. Wendigo? So Changeling. Wow, that's it. So Wendigo it's called Morphice, that's why. So Wendigo is one of the Morphice. I think Changeling actually is just an all-around better piece of ice, so it might be a better example. The idea with these ice is that they have 2 types. They'd start with one type, so this one starts with a barrier, and if it gets advanced, it gains Sentry. So the idea is that if you have an Anson Rose and you res a Changeling, you can basically choose which subtype it's going to get. If you put an even amount on it or an odd amount, or just put 1 on it or don't put any at all. And that's very interesting because breaking a 4 strength barrier or Sentry is pretty hard. This also makes Lycan slightly better. Lycan is not good a piece of ice considering it has 3 strength and could have been easily broken by a Mimic for 6 credits. But if you have a code gate that trashes a program that you can change to a code gate immediately when you res it, that might actually be worth something for the surprise factor. I'm not actually sure. I think also for what it's worth, trashing programs has gotten a bit worse in the meta with things like Paperclip and MK Ultra. But still, that is kind of cool, especially against Criminal. So these kind of Morphling Ice did get a lot better because you do have some flexibility with Anson Rose. Lastly is probably the most excitingly, and that is the res when advanced pieces of ice. And these ice were generally considered to be terrible before Anson Rose. I think they are a lot better now. How good? Not entirely sure, but definitely better. So Tyrant sucked because you had to res Tyrant when the runner hit it, so you're paying 7 credits for a piece of ice that does nothing, and then you can start advancing things after. And at some point you can get a 4 strength barrier that has like 6 end the runs on it, which is actually not too bad. If you were doing it the old-fashioned way, advancing, it takes way too much time, way too many credits, it's not worth it. But with Anson Rose, you can just have Anson Rose chilling, and then the runner like charges Anson Rose, you res him, and then you dump, oh boy, where are we? We're here. Oh, you dump 6 end the run subroutines on here, which you paid 1 credit for, and that's a serious piece of ice. I think by far the most fun is Woodcutter, which gives Wayland an ice that instantly kills the runner if they're not prepared for it. So if the runner isn't able to prepare to break a 2-strength sentry that has many subroutines, if Anson's been chilling for a long time, they'll die. Bonus points if you're playing Builder of Nations, because if they pass through it, they'll die. It adds 1 more meat damage, so they might actually die. This, I think, makes Anson Rose incredibly scary, because if you have an Anson Rose that has like 4 counters on it, 5 counters on it, and an unres piece of ice in front of it, you generally want to charge Anson Rose before you charge any other remotes if there's other unresed ice, because it robs the runner of the ability of, say they have a Tyrant on a remote server, you want to get the Anson first, just so that that remote server with a Tyrant on it is useless, or all the ice walls become not so good anymore. But the idea is that if you can't deal with a woodcutter, you might lose the game on a face check, which is pretty silly, and definitely gives Anson some teeth. Last things you can do with Anson, the idea that you can heavily advance ice without it being entirely clumsy is you can run things. Oh boy, spelling. Yes, you can run things like commercialization. And in my tests, I would have like an ice wall with 6 easily, 6 or any piece of ice with like 6 advancements on it that I did trivially. And now commercialization is a 0 cost transaction that gives you 6 credits. And that's really good for obvious reasons. The last fun thing I can think of with Anson is cards like, oh boy, what's it called? Back channels, right? This is technically a card in the server with advancement tokens on it. So at some point, you can have an Anson Rose that has like 12 credits on it because all your ice is res and the runner doesn't care to trash it. And you back channels Anson and you make 36 credits. And that's really cool. That's really cool. There's also that Wayland asset that builds things that I can't remember the name of. Mumbad Construction? But I think these combo really well together. Yeah, I found it. These really combo well together if you want to have a deck that moves credits around. Mamba Construction Co. also helps Woodcutter in theory, because you can spend 2 credits to move an advancement token onto the ice, and you can get your advanceable ice up really fast. This card is super expensive, but it's so much fun to play with. So Anson Rose is really cool. There's actually a 5th kind of ice that Anson works with, and that's Mausolus, which is the first of its kind. So Mausolus, a bit of a backstory, is actually a figure from history. Mausolus was the Greek ruler, or not, the name isn't Greek, but is a ruler of Caria. He was known as the Persian satrap. These are words I know very little about, but he was a ruler from 377 to 353 BC. He is the reason why we have the mausoleum at Halicarnassus, and it's actually the origin of the word mausoleum. This is Mausolus, the ruler. That's his image on a coin that actually might be in front of my camera, so that's the dude. No, that's not him. Oh, it says perhaps, so it might be him. We don't know. So this is a Mausolus. And Mausolus is a pretty good piece of Wayland Ice, which is a really weird thing to say, because that doesn't happen much. There's like 1 good piece of Wayland Ice, I think. It's called Archer. So this is Mausolus. It's 4 to res, 5 strength, so that's great. If you have strength to res cost ratio, that's really good. It's a code gate. It's also AP. And Mausolus can be advanced. Now, this is a new type of advanceable ice, and it says if Mausolus has 3 or more power or advancement tokens on it, do the parenthetical text instead, otherwise do not resolve it. So you now have subroutines that change based off of the advancements on this piece of ice. So if you don't have 3 advancement tokens, Mausolus does this. Corp gains a credit, do 1 net damage, give the runner 1 tag. Very similar to Thoth, isn't it? Now, if you do have 3 advancement tokens on it, which you could do by playing Anson or by playing things like Dedication Ceremony. Also, this is a great card in your advanced ice deck. So you place 3 advancements on it for 1 click, 1 credit. That's good. Mausolus is up to speed. And now it says the corp gains 3 credits. That's pretty good. Do 3 net damage. That's absurd, considering it's also not a Jinteki ice. I think that's the first time that's ever happened. And give the runner 1 tag and end the run. So there's an end the run on a code gate in Wayland. That's nuts. That's really cool. I don't think that's ever happened. That's great. So this is a really solid piece of ice. Even if you don't advance it, it's 4 credits, 5 strength. It's hard to break. Like if you break this with a Gordian Blade, it's like what? 6 credits? Ugh. And if you don't break it, it doesn't end the run, which is kind of annoying unless you advance it, which I think you kind of want to do, but finding time and tempo for that is pretty hard. But even if you don't, 1 credit, 1 net damage, 1 tag that's a taxing piece of ice. If you have that on R&D and you want to run every turn to charge your medium, that's going to be a problem. If you run last click also, this is a code gate that gives a tag and not a trace, right? Like all the Wayland Ice, I think, had traces on them, things like Shadow if you want to take a tag. So you could always pay out of it. But this is just, no, you have a tag. You ran last click against Wayland, you goofed. Yeah, you done goofed. So that's really cool. Advancing it also makes it a lot better. One complaint I have about this card is the sentence, do the parenthetical text. What? What is that? That's really weird. I've never heard it. Just that is obviously like hard for a technical writer to write out what you want this thing to do, but do is not a keyword I've heard in Netrunner before. Like do text, that just doesn't seem elegant to me, and I wish there was a better way to do it. I think that is kind of ugly, but I don't know what else to say. This is a good piece of Wayland Ice, which is something to celebrate, right? It really is. And we got one more. This is Sapper. Sapper, it's another Wayland piece of ice. It's 3 credits. It's a Sentry Destroyer. It's only 2 strength, which is not too bad. And if Sapper is accessed from R&D, the runner must reveal it. When the runner accesses Sapper, he or she encounters it. Ignore this ability if the runner accesses Sapper from archives. Trash. 1 program is its only subroutine. It also has a trash cost of 2, which is it's a big deal. It actually is a pretty big deal. If you haven't seen, this is a new thing that's happened before. It's been happening in the cycle. If you're new to Netrunner, as of this cycle, operations and ice, some of them, specifically the really scary ones, have trash costs on them, and they operate the same way a thing like an asset or an upgrade does. If you access it, you can trash it. Now, Sapper is a bit more dangerous because if you access it, the subroutine fires. If you have programs, you can break it, and it follows all normal Netrunner rules. But after that, you can pay to trash it. This is really cool. This is a trash program subroutine that you have to be careful for when running just about anywhere on Wayland. So if there's one card this card hates on so much, it's Mongoose. Oh my god, does it ruin Mongoose. If you install it, Mongoose costs 3 credits to break this 3 credit piece of ice, which is very good. That's a good returns for a piece of ice. For Mimic, it's only 1, which is a bit unfortunate, but let's just focus on Mongoose. The best thing you can abuse about Mongoose is, say you have an archer on an R&D and they run through it and they break it with Mongoose and they think they're nice and good. Now they hit Sapper and they've used their program once already this run, so they can't use it again, so the Sapper fires, and trashing a program in Criminal is one of the best things you can do because they have no recursion. That's really good. So this is good. It makes early accesses scary if you don't have a Sentry Breaker. Wayland does not have a proper threat, a sentry threat, I don't think, in faction. Yeah, the only sentries you have to worry for are things like Caduceus, which isn't that big of a deal. Shadow is annoying. I like that card a lot, but like you can face check that if you want. Archer's basically the only sentry that I worry about when I play against Wayland, and this is a new one, and this changes the game dramatically. And Archer, like, you only have to worry about when they score an agenda. This is on since turn 1. If these are floating around in HQ, that's really good. You might actually let accesses in the early game. If you're playing a rush deck, that's really good. A lot of times runners will install their Fractor because they know they're playing against Wayland, so they have a lot of ice walls to deal with. They're decoder, so they don't get locked out by an early Quandary or Enigma, and then make many accesses. This also compares somewhat, if they can't break it, of course. This compares to things like Cyberdeck's Virus Suite. Just because of the runner, you know, This is a very good tactic to do against Wayland if they're rushing. Put down a medium, run R&D a bunch. And now if they, similar to Cyberdeck's Virus Suite, but better in some ways, if they hit the Sapper in R&D, you can trash their medium, which is better than purging. That's actually really cool. If you draw this in hand and you don't want to keep it around, you can just install it. And having a trash program subroutine that doesn't end the run it's worse than Rototurret for that reason. Like, it doesn't end the run, but trashing a program is still something. I do have a feeling that trashing program subroutines are a bit worse than they were, say, a couple months ago, just because a lot of Anarchs are running the like Paperclip and MK Ultra, and let's pull those up, I guess. But they're the fractors, they're the breakers that you can pull from the heap when they are trashed, so you can't actually permanently trash them unless you play something like Arc Lockdown. So trashing programs, like the idea that you think, oh, I'm a clever Wayland player, I'm going to put the Sapper in front of an ice wall and score an early remote because all they have a paperclip. That doesn't work because they'll just trash the paperclip, then they'll encounter the ice wall, they'll pull the paperclip back and break the piece of ice. It is taxing in terms of credits, but it's not the way it used to be where you could think, oh, Destroyer into end the run, that's a remote server, let's go. So that's a bit unfortunate. It's also a trashable piece of ice, so if it does get trashed and you want it back, this is why things like Friends at High Places is so good. Pull it back at any time. This is great. 2 influence, you could also technically splash it. Any deck that I would splash this in, basically in any deck that doesn't expect a Sentry Breaker on an early face check. So I think the best you have there is NBN, and I don't know if it's worth it in there, because I guess maybe just play Cobra. But definitely good. It definitely changes the game for Wayland because now you do have to respect. You need an early sentry if you want to face check things, which is good. That's really cool. Let's move on. This is Show of Force. It is a new neutral agenda. Always exciting to see neutral agendas. They really open up the design space for everyone equally. Sort of. It's 4 advancement for 2. It's a 4 for 2 agenda. It's a security agenda. Subtypes on agendas generally don't matter, but I'll promise you in the future they will. We have seen cards in the next cycle that say when the runner scores a security or I forget the other subtypes of agendas because they haven't mattered so far, but they might matter in the future. Text on this is really simple. When you score Show of Force, do 2 meat damage. Okay. All right. That's something. This agenda, it's difficult to kill the runner with, besides in certain circumstances. If you're just playing this in Wayland, right, and you play this and you install advance, you have to get the runner down to, 1 card to be able to kill with this, which isn't very realistic, so I don't see that being that good unless you have a really specialized deck. Oh, how can you specialize around this card? There's, I think, 3 ways? I think 2 ways. The first is core Jinteki, Personal Evolution. Now, Personal Evolution says whenever you score or agenda stolen, you do 1 net damage. So if you're scoring Show of Force in Personal Evolution, that's 2 meat damage, 1 net damage, and that is a lot easier to kill someone with. The idea is that you can Mushin no Shin this agenda onto the table. Oh, if you haven't seen, then there's an alt art for Mushin no Shin that's coming out real soon. Mushin no Shin on the gen onto the table, advance it once maybe, and now the runner can see whether they run or not. It could be a trap, or it could be an agenda. So the idea is if you have this out, don't score it unless it's lethal, and then at any point in time, if the runner has gone down to or ended their turn with less than 3 cards in hand, and maybe you also want to have some Mushin Ronins out there, you can kill the runner. Like, you pop a Ronin, do 3 net damage. You pop Show of Force, do 2 meat damage, 1 net damage. That's lethal. This card is a lot better with things like Chairman Hero because that reduces hand size. There's a card we're going to talk about in a second that's very good with. But you can actually build something that uses this as a kill if it's not ran. I do have some apprehension about running 2-point agendas in Personal Evolution. Its ability does work a lot better when you have a lot of agendas, just because it fires more often, and generally these decks runs a lot of 1-pointers or a lot of defensive agendas, things like Future Perfect or Fetal AI. I'd have to test it, but like just having 2-point agendas that don't protect themselves seems a bit dodgy. And maybe, like, the thing is, the game might be shorter if the runner gets good accesses, and whether that's worth the like immediate threat. It might just be because having basically like your 4th, 5th, and 6th Ronin in a deck that's trying to kill with Ronin and also has advanceable traps, that seems really good. The last way that I think you can combo this, which you can build some like really dedicated weird combo decks, is 24/7. I think that, how do you do this? Like 24, there we, okay, I don't know why that would work. 24/7 news cycle. As an additional cost to play 24/7 news cycle, forfeit an agenda, resolve the when scored ability on an agenda in your score area. So you play 24/7 news cycle, you forfeit an agenda, and you do 2 meat damage. In theory, if you play 3 of these in a turn, that's 6 meat damage. And here we are going into combo territory. How deep can we go? How hard is it to play 3 24/7 news cycle in a deck in 1 turn? Nearly impossible, unless, of course, you're playing accelerated diagnostics combos. Yeah, so accelerated diagnostic combo, I don't have enough time right now to talk about them if you're not familiar with them, but the idea is that you set up your deck, you basically choose the top 3 cards of your deck, and then you play accelerated diagnostics, so you play only 3 24/7's news cycle. Cool thing about this card specifically with 24/7, it says you may play them paying their play costs, ignoring any additional costs. So on 24/7, where it says you have to sacrifice an agenda, you don't have to. So you play 3 24/7s, sacrifice no agendas, do 6 meat damage. This is a combo deck that will be played for fun. I doubt it's very good, considering it's actually pretty hard to score a show of force. But you can do it. I encourage it. Let's move on. This is the last card. How are we doing on time? This is Enforced Curfew. We are doing okay. Actually, not that good. This is Enforced Curfew. It's an operation. It's a current. It's neutral. So it has the current text. It's not trashed until an agenda is played or stolen, or another current is played or stolen. And it says the runner's maximum hand size is reduced by 1. It's a 0. Okay, so alone, if this card was blank, it is a 0 cost current that the corp can play to shut off all the runner currents. Currently in the game, there's another YouTube channel that I'm a big fan of. It's called by a guy named Baoken. His name is Ben Nee. His channel is called Boont. And he just came 2nd in Worlds. He's a really good player. And he recently came out with a video talking about currents. And I totally agree with him. The idea with currents right now is that the runner currents are universally good. And they're so easy to recur. They're so easy to recur and they're so good that generally runner currents you're going to have to deal with them. So it's really important that corps are either being able to fast advance agendas or have currents to play. This is a really good current, even if it does nothing. And this is kind of annoying to put like a slot in it in your deck. But being able to play a card to stop a current that costs 0, that's really good. That's okay. That's not too bad at all, even if it did nothing. Like if we want to look at all the currents, let's sort by cost, right? There's not that many 0 cost currents. Most of them are all NBN, and then there's 1 Wayland one. So we now have 1 neutral one. So that kind of opens up some sort of design space. As unexciting as that is to play a blank current, it is definitely something. And I guess you could play scarcity resources for 1 credit, which might be universally better in a deck that doesn't benefit off of hand size, but here we are. Alright, so what does the ability do? Max hand size reduced by 1. This current you can kill a runner with. If you get the runner to 0 hand size and you play this, and then the runner finishes their turn without turning it off or scoring an agenda, they will die if their hand size is -1, which is hilarious that there's now a current in the game that will kill the runner. So why you want to reduce hand size by 1? Big reason is you're trying to kill the runner. And an easy way to do this is these sort of industrial genomics decks. I think that's a really good current for them. This is Maxi. Shout out to Maxi. That's the deck I played. Maxi built a deck I played for Canadian Nationals. So this is a Maxi deck. It's running 2 Enforced Curfew, it seems. And if you haven't played these industrial genomics decks, they put a lot of assets that do net damage if you trash them or if you don't trash them. And then they try and kill you with this Ronin combo. The idea is they fire this. So if the runner has 4 hand size, they're a lot easier to kill. Like you only need to fire 2 bioethics associations and 1 Ronin. And that's actually a really big deal. This deck also specifically runs Enforced Curfew just to turn off things like Employee Strike, because Employee Strike wrecks industrial genomics. So that's also really good. So yeah, if you're playing Kill in Jinteki, this card's really good. Another thing you can do with it is you can run it in Cybernetics Division. I'm not sure how good this idea is. I haven't played a lot with it. I'm not actually convinced it's very good. But you can basically make the runner play with 3 hand size, which is absolutely pretty funny. That seems kind of difficult, and if you put snares in your deck and other brain damage, that could be annoying really quickly. Anti-synergy with Sweeps Week, so watch out for that. And I think the last card I'm going to mention with this is Chief's Lee. Chief's Lee, say you get counters on Chief's Lee. Chief's Lee does 5 meat damage. And if the runner has 4 hand size, Chief's Lee is lethal. Let's go, Chief's Lee. That's Enforced Curfew. I think it's really good. You're going to see it in a lot of really annoying prison decks that are trying to kill you, either through meat or net damage. And it's good. It's pretty great. Whew. All right, cool. That's Martial Law. This is a really good pack. There's good ice in this pack. I think Friends in High Places is going to see so much play. It's just universally fantastic as such a good utility card. I'm worried it might push this acid spam meta. Sorry, there's a lot of cards on that street. It might push an acid spam meta, so not looking forward to that, but it's definitely really, really good. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is the first time I've done an unboxing like this. I know these videos run a bit long. I hope this is okay. I'm going to try and be a bit more brief, I guess, but I really like doing in-depth stuff. Me rambling on at the end doesn't help too much, I guess, for the time length. Last thing I want to say, this is, I'm going on a Christmas holiday thing because it's Christmas this weekend. So happy holidays or Merry Christmas to whoever does that. I'll be back next week and we're going to start streaming. I'm super excited for that. I'm going to do some tests earlier on in the week and probably around Thursday, I think. I'm going to start streaming. That's really exciting. We're going to go hop on gintechie.net and play some games. I'm really excited to be able to bring the kind of the quality, I hope, of narration that we've been doing on the last, on all the videos I've been producing before this, but we're going to do it in real time and I hope people chat and it's going to be a lot of fun. Wow, cool. I need a drink of water desperately. Thanks so much for watching this and stay tuned. Ciao.